Thanks again for signing up for the Kirkwood training webinar here. I'm Dave Hughes. I'm the Kirkwood Community College's Fire and Safety Programmer. Kirkwood is also a host site for Great Plains OSHA education. So we offer official OSHA classes. This is a class that we just developed. It's not an official OSHA class, but it's a safety class, and that's what's important. So today we're going to talk about what ANSI says, American National Standard Institute. They developed this standard, MEWP, back in December of 2018. Finally got through all the loops and the jumping around they had to do, and it came into effect on the 1st of June of this year. Just a reminder what ANSI is. It's a private nonprofit organization that oversees the development of voluntary consensus standards for products, services, processes, systems, and personnel in the United States. OSHA does not require compliance with this, but they consider ANSI as a best practice, and at times they will cite you in the duty clause, general duty clause of an ANSI standard. So the references that I used to develop this presentation, you can see them on the screen there, the 92.24. These are available in the ANSI for cost. You have to just go to ANSI.com, I believe it is, and order them up, get them electronically and print them out and use them how you need to. So we're going to be talking about paragraph 5, 6, and 7 today. So what ANSI did is they took the MEWP, and this MEWP is a term that you're just going to have to remember versus aerial or scissors or whatever. What they did was they divided them into groups. The group A is a scissors lift, where the platform stays within the frame, within the tipping lines as they call it. Group B are the ones that extend. On the left-hand side of the slide, at least my left, you can see I broke them down into the groups and the types. What they do is divided it also into groups and types. As I said, the group A and B transported within the stowed position. B, you can see an example there. It's kind of moved where it needs to be. It's mounted to the bridge there and used on that. But our most common ones we're going to see are the groups A and B type 3. Going to be our aerial lift that we're used to saying, and our scissors lift. So who's required to be trained? Well, the easiest thing to say is anybody and everybody that's in the area that could possibly be on that MEWP. But ANSI goes in and divides it up into operators, supervisors, and occupants. For the training on the MEWP, the operator and supervisor is going to have to be trained in inspections, maintenance, use, application, and operations. This is not new for the operator, but for you supervisors, maybe time to start hitting the books here, and you're going to have to know all this about every MEWP that you have on site. Occupant may be a new word, a new definition for you. It's basically somebody that's working in the platform. They're not trained to be an operator. Any kind of, and we're going to talk about this specifically for the occupant, is that they'll need to know some basic safety when they're up in the basket. So we'll get into that. But again, the bottom line is everybody that's in the area needs to get the training on that. The training content comes from the user's manufacturer's operations manual. Really emphasize in the standard to make sure that they reference the service manual, specifications, the owner's manual, whatever you want to call it, is on the lift. And it needs to be in a tight compartment container so I can refer to it quickly. The training that they suggest, they're talking classroom presentation, practical hands-on evaluations, and familiarization. Again, it may be a different term. Bottom line is familiarization to know what the purpose of and function of all the controls are, specific features, and operating characteristics. So you need to be very familiar with that piece of equipment. As always, training should be done by a qualified person, and that person's trained to that specific MEWP, has extensive knowledge and experience, demonstrate ability to solve or resolve problems when operating. So get your best operator, get them up to speed, get them trained on it so they can train the other employees. The type of MEWP needed, well, that's how we start our training. That's our first step. So we figure out which one we need, and then we can develop our program from that. Some examples are site access, surface and distance, stability. Are we going to be on a hard surface, soft surface? How high do we need to go? I'd like to think that shorter is better here. So you don't have that possibility of going really, really high where you don't need to. Maneuverability, depends on what the job is. Are you going to have to go up and over and around things, or are you just going to have to go up and over, or you just go straight up? So that'll help determine what MEWP you need, and then the training, obviously. Hazards associated with the operation. This is one we really got to take some time on. You want to look for holes and bumps and any drop-offs. Basically, what's the site look like? If you're going up, what are the overhead restrictions? And then obviously with the overhead restrictions, we need to ensure that there's no voltage up there. Excuse me, especially high voltage lines. Be aware of that. Safe traveling. Again, how far am I going to have to drive? Any obstacles, any surfaces? Weather. Well, this is, our weather system's gotten a little bit better. Pretty much can predict where we need to take cover with shelter. Sometimes in some places right to the minute when the storm's going to hit. But our weather conditions in determining the MEWP, is it cold out, it's going to be hot. Some other additional information is how's the lift going to need to be powered, battery, propane, or gas. So now we determined what our MEWP is. Now I'm going to talk about some topics that we need to train on. Maybe some more new terms here. Qualified person performs inspection. They suggest a frequent inspection there. ANSI describes a frequent inspection as a MEWP has been out of service for 3 months. It could be an example of over the winter months, or just wasn't used on the last job. Environmental conditions. Again, is it going to be hot or cold? And affects the operation of the machine. Heck, it affects the operation of us. The machine gets affected too. Dusty and wet conditions may require more inspections of it. Annual inspection performed within 13 months of the prior annual inspection. And then your pre-start inspection. That's done before each day, at the beginning of each shift. Operator shall perform a pre-start and a function test. So again, you guys may have different names for these, but this is what ANSI brings out with the frequent inspection, the annual inspection, and a pre-start inspection. You should be able to get these lists from your vendor, your service provider that provided you the lift. Obviously, if you go online or buy it from another person, get to the Google and Google the model number and the style, and print out what you need to and develop your program from there. Another part of the training is the manufacturer's warning. This panel, they seem to put this panel on the deck, and you're expected to be able to read through each one of these. A little difficult figuring out what the symbol means. So what I had to do is I went to the service manual and took away the no sign there, and looked at the symbol and trying to figure it out. Obviously, the first one on the right, you're going to be able to figure this no jewelry. The second one down, it kind of looked like a whirlwind. I had to read it. It's talk about entanglement of hoses and any kind of rope that you may be using. Next one talks about don't exceed the capacity. So it shows a lot of people on the platform. Don't disturb the load unevenly. And on the bottom one there, sees somebody falling out of the platform. It's like, well, that could be a lot of things. And I went to the description, and you can see it is a lot of things, basically, and not walking around, keep a firm footing. So what happens with these warning signs is they seem to disappear. We all know that signs do that. They're still there, but we're not really aware of them because it just doesn't catch our attention right away. So during the training, this needs to catch your attention. And any operator, the operators need to know what these warning signs are. They need to be able to teach that to the operators, or the operators need to teach to the operators and to the occupant. Supervisors need to be aware of it. So again, take your time and look at these manufacturer warnings. Wind and weather. Well, this really came to light in October of 2010 after a scissors lift blew over at the University of Notre Dame practice while took the life of a student that was filming the practice. After a six-month investigation, the main reason for the tip over were released, and one of them was a sudden, extraordinary 53-mile-an-hour burst of wind. A staff member's lack of knowledge regarding on-field wind speeds. The lift that fell was structurally different than the other two that they used and was more susceptible to tipping. And of course, the height that they were at increased the accident. So just listening to those and reading those, it really reflects what ANSI is trying to get some training through. Lightning and storms, I mentioned before that storms seem to be able to be pinpointed a little bit closer, so we need to keep an eye on the weather. Kind of sneak up on us once in a while. If we know weather's going to come in, we need to get them lifts down and get people out of harm's way. So if you look at the picture there was a modification. Hopefully you can see that modification. It's the banner. So what the banner did is it cupped the wind, provides an extra force on the side rails, and allows it to tip over easier. The bottom line here is no modifications are allowed that would affect stability unless approved by the manufacturer. Good luck on getting approval by the manufacturer. Again, this needs to be taught that any kind of modifications, gotta limit those and get them approved before you do it. Common wind speed is about 28 mile an hour. However, some machines have a 0 wind speed. So again, back to the owner's manual. Figure out what an acceptable wind speed is. So one way you can do it, if you kind of just narrow things down to what it looks like when the wind is blowing without having a meter. They call the Beaufort scale. It's a good reference to that. If you look at the common wind speed, I said it was 28 mile an hour. It states that larger tree branches moving and whistling wires. It's a pretty good clip right there. Go down to the 53 mile an hour with the accident that happened at Notre Dame, and it talks about structural damage and slate roofs blowing off. Huge indicator right away that we got some high winds. I personally like the smoke drifting indicator when the smoke's drifting indicates the wind direction. That's pretty much what I'll go up into a lift on. So just a FYI here on the Beaufort scale, just kind of gives you a visual of what's going on. PPE always needs to be part of your lift program, but I know that everybody everybody's required, does a risk assessment pretty much on everything. Is it safe to do? Are we doing it right? Et cetera, et cetera. But your risk assessment will determine what PPE that you're going to be using. Again, I would pretty much guess that every company here that's represented requires gloves, hard hats, and fall protection when they use these. So the rules have not changed here. Employees are required to assess what the PPE needs, provide the PPE training, and train on it. So again, part of the MEWP training is we need to add this in there. So now you've added more time into your training needs. Note there on the left there that all the Group B MEWP operation occupants shall use fall protection. They did not for Group A, did not require that to have fall protection, but I don't think that's a bad idea. Training on the PPE includes, I just want to put this in there, is your ABCs of fall protection, your anchor points, the body wear, the fall protection equipment, and then your connecting devices. Another item to talk about are your MEWP controls. Operator needs to be able to operate the control smoothly, avoiding any kind of sudden stops, starts, or changes in direction. It takes a little while to figure that out. You got to have that touch. Never operate the controls when outside the operator's control station. This needs definitely a no-no. Keep the co-workers on the ground clear of any operator lift. Any lifts that are operating, keep the people away. Don't position any part of the MEWP over anyone, and never override any safety system. If you got people that know how to override that system, they need to be retrained not to do that, and that systems need to get fixed. Again, it takes time for the operators to get good at this, so patience and practice needs to be allowed. Example is if you're using an MEWP and you're renting it, it shows up at 6 o'clock. The operator is unfamiliar with it, would not expect the operator to be on that lift at 6:10, knowing that he's doing an effective job and in a safe way. Learning as you go is not always the best form of training here. Take your time, it'll pay off. So maybe the day before, get that MEWP and run everybody through it. So we just covered a few small portion of what needs to be trained on for both the operator and supervisor. Again, I can't emphasize enough, the owner's manual, operator's manual will help the qualified operator to learn about the lift and so he can train on it. So we're going to go specifically to what ANSI says about the supervisor and occupant trainer. So additionally, the supervisor, was what we just covered was trained as well as the operator. They also need to know what the proper selection of the MEWP. Again, they're the ones that are calling the home base, calling the office to order up the right MEWP, get it brought out. So they're going to have to do that assessment before they start the training and start the job. Rules and regulations and standards that apply. So again, you supervisors are going to have to hit the books here. Going to have to read that owner's manual and maybe make some cheat sheets and make sure that everybody on property knows about it. Requirements for safe use. We're going to touch on that here in a couple slides. Familiarity with work being performed. Again, that comes with experience. You're going to have to, as a supervisor, ask a lot of questions of the workers, of the engineers, whoever set up the program, the job. Be very familiar with what's going on. Potential hazards. Again, your surface. What is the surface that the MEWP is going to work on, the weather, and then the layout of the site. And then means to protect against identified hazards. So once you do the assessment, you're going to be able to determine these hazards, and then you, as a supervisor, need to take actions to make sure your workers are safe. Again, you got your occupant training. Again, this may be a new term to you. You may just take everybody's going to be an operator on that lift, or maybe a sub will come in, and you're not going to take time to train them on the entire lift, so they can be considered as an occupant. Basically, they do need to know some things, though. They need to know how to work on the MEWP safely, some do's and don'ts. Don't climb on the rail. Don't stand on the bucket that's in there. Don't work out, lean over. Operate the MEWP controls in case of a emergency. The occupant needs to know how to lower that lift in the event of emergency. They're up in the basket and something happens to the operator, they need to be able to know how to lower it. Requirements for fall protection. So if you're requiring fall protection, then you need to make sure that they're trained on that. Know their actions that could affect stability. Again, they need to, up in those lifts, every action seems to be exaggerated as you bounce around and move from side to side. So nice and smooth. Site work procedures. So they need to know the policies for the work. They need to know what PPE needs to be required, their limitations of safety, what they can do and what they can't do. Hazards related to the task and ways to mitigate them. So if there are some hazards that the occupant needs to know, they need to be shared with them. And then back to the warning signs and instructions. They need to know what those little stickers are all around the lift. So these are specifically for the supervisor and occupant. It's good to see that these topics are coming up. By ANSI has put them up in front of us. So that'll be your classroom. Now we're going to talk about classroom and walk around the machine. Now we're going to give them a chance to do some hands-on activities. And again, I can't emphasize enough, time is needed here. Patience is required. So we want to allow the operator enough time to demonstrate proficiency, so you can make a checklist. ANSI does have a checklist within that standard. They suggest look at the owner's manual. You should be able to get the checklist from there for any kind of hands-on, or what's important to you that you think is relevant is kind of the checklist that you need to develop. Familiarization with the MEWP, again, they need to be familiar with it, what the warning signs are, what the emergency up and down are. Controls, make sure that they're moving them safely with the function and the major components. And performance, they need to know how to do an inspection. They should demonstrate that. And then again, operate and function of all the controls. And again, this comes with time, comes with patience. Trial by fire here is not a good idea. Putting them up in, teaching them a little classroom, and then, okay, go up there and start running around and moving the lift around. You need to take time with each one, each student, as we can call it, and train them on these, give them some good practical time. I want to touch a little bit on retraining, and we go through this list, and it's pretty much why we train. Expiration of the operator's valid training period. Before you start asking questions and saying, hey, there is no time frame, that is correct. ANSI did not institute a time frame for retraining, like the forklift trainer. Every 3 years on the forklift, not a bad idea to go with that. But again, there's no OSHA, ANSI has not stated a valid time period here that everybody needs to get retrained on. That's really up to you, the company, that needs to do that. Operator's performance is not adequate, so we see somebody that's just horse playing, doing a little Mario Andretti, driving around real fast. We need to get them retrained on that. Operators not operated the MEWP for an extended period of time. Maybe they're out for an illness, maybe there's an emergency, or maybe they just reassigned. Maybe they just were in the office for a while and now they're back, so they need to get retrained on these. Introduction of a new or different technology. So you bring out a different MEWP that people really haven't seen. We need to get trained on that. They're not all the same. So controls, pictures are different, warnings are different. The operators involved in an accident or near miss, don't forget those near misses. Like, woo, I got away with one. Well, next time you may not get away with one. As always, this training needs to be done by a qualified person, and you, the employer, needs to determine who that qualified person is. On some of this retraining, that somebody does something, something bad, or they're just not up to par, you don't necessarily have to retrain on everything, just on that specific item. You don't have to retrain everybody in the company. That happens sometimes. If somebody messes up, then everybody gets retrained on it. It's not a bad idea to retrain the person and just re-emphasize the point that you're retraining them on, not pinpointing them out either. Risk assessment, kind of touched on that before, that we were going to do a little bit more detailed here. So this is kind of a list that I came up with. Again, you can create your own assessment, and I would bet everybody here has their own assessment to determine the risk. So I just want to cover a couple of them here. Identify the tasks to be undertaken. Okay, what are we going to be doing? It needs to be clearly identified. Locations need to be identified. Again, everybody on site needs to know about that. Selecting the appropriate MEWP, working at heights and reach. What kind of reach are you going to need? Constraints of the work site. Maybe the big old lift that I usually use just is too big for this area, so we got to rent a smaller one. Again, we need to be trained on that. Good ground access, conditions and site access. We got solid ground. Consider if it's going to rain, how much of that dirt's going to turn into muck. Assess the risk associated with the task. What's the location here? What's the material and equipment we're going to be using on the lift? How's that affect our capacity? Identify lift control measures. We're talking here is if you got an electrician that's replacing overhead lights, maybe they need to do a lockout tagout on that circuit, so they're not going to get exposed to that danger. Identify safe work procedures. Again, emergency procedures. Everybody needs to know how to lower that basket from the ground. And then communications. How are we going to communicate if we have any issues? And rescue, we're going to rescue from height. We're going to touch on here in a couple slides. Safe use program. Again, ANSI kind of put this program together. Part of the this was part of their update of is a safe use program. This includes, as you can read faster than I can read, performing site risk assessment. Pretty much already did that. Talked about that. Selecting the correct type. Prepare and maintain the work site, ensuring it support the MEWP. So we may have to bring some more stone in. Maybe the particular MEWP we bring in has to be an all-terrain. And once we get the blacktop or concrete down, then we can change to a different one if need be. Inspection of the MEWP, that program needs to be there. You need to have a daily inspection sheet. Whatever items that you feel that are important that comply with what the manufacturer recommends. Maintenance and repair services. Well, if you got your own shop that does a maintenance or repair, make sure they have a good program, periodic inspections, maintenance of it, make sure everything's good to go. If you're renting equipment, you probably want to make sure that you ensure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, because that's your guys and gals up in them platforms. Train employee on the specific MEWP they are operating. Can't say that enough. Train supervisors to monitor the performance and prevent unauthorized use of the MEWP. That happens at times. Somebody says, yeah, I'm good to go. I've done this for 30 years. Well, next thing you know, they're stuck in a hole or something's gone wrong. So make sure that those people are trained on it. If they're not, don't let them on. Safety to those in the area not operating the MEWP, that is huge. Not everybody's going to be on there, but things do drop from these platforms. Platforms move very quickly at times, erratically, meaning that the operator knows the way they're moving, but people on the ground don't. So that people on the ground need to know what's going on. Put cones out, get people away. Again, this all needs to be in your training. This all needs to be talked about. All right, rescue from heights. So one last item I'd like to talk about here. We talked with a lot of, and this is an area that can create some confusion in the sense of how far do we do the training? What are we going to, what's our limited training here to be able to rescue somebody from a height? So I don't have that answer 100%, but our consensus with instructors is to ensure that the operators, supervisors, and occupants know how to lower or move the platform in emergency, both by the platform and ground controls. So again, at the minimum, that's what ANSI kind of states, that people on the ground, anybody that's going to be around there needs to know how to lower that. What you see here is a example of Skyjack. I got this off of Skyjack manual showing how to do emergency controls. Not a bad idea to print this out and give it to everybody. Maybe post it on the lift if at all possible. Refer to it regularly so people know how to lower this. Okay. Kind of keep on going with the rescue from heights. This plan needs to be written, shared with employees. Employees need to know what to do. When somebody's stuck up in the lift, and the time to start training on it is not then. Employees need to be able to stay calm, cool, and collected and know what to do to get the people down. Now, the other side, I kind of mentioned that how far do you go with your training? The other side of the training is how to rescue them from if the height, if for some reason the platform won't come down, maybe it's tipped over onto another structure, onto another lift. Something's happened that has failed completely. How far do we train to be able to go up there and rescue that person? There's a lot of you really got to make that decision within your company. I talked to an employer that pretty much he does roofing, and pretty much his fall protection plan is always when they're on site is to get with the local fire department and ensure that they know that the fire department knows that they're there on site. They talk to the fire department for the capacity to be able to do rescue and develop a plan. And then everybody in that area knows what the plan is. If we do have to go up and rescue somebody, if people aren't trained on that, you really got to hesitate on allowing them to do that. So there's 3 basic rescue from height, and this ANSI talks about this as your self-rescue. The person involved, they can push the button, they can get down. Assisted rescue by others in the work area, and then technical rescue by emergency services. You can take a week-long class, 2-week-long class to know how to rescue people from heights. But if you're out in the open, there's nothing to anchor to. That's a whole nother issue about that. So if you already have a fall protection rescue plan training, make sure that this is incorporated into your training for the MEWP training. If you don't have a fall protection plan, you probably need to start working on one. So the conclusion here, platforms are a useful piece of equipment for construction and warehouse. Proper training concern their use, again, for operator inspection, testing, maintenance is vital to the safety of the employee. MEWP needs to be working properly. Again, only employees who have been properly trained and who have received MEWP specific familiarization can operate that. So you need to emphasize that, and always work safely while operating. Emphasize that to the operators, to the occupants, because it's part of their job. Safety is part of the job. Here at Kirkwood, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, if you're not familiar where we're at, we are, again, a host site for OSHA training. We do offer this MEW, the Mobile Elevating Work Platform class. It's a 4-hour class. We recommend it to anybody that's going to operate the MEWP. Again, we're not going to qualify you. We're not going to certify you. We're a third party. It's your employer that says, yep, we're good with the training, and go from there. So if you do attend, we recommend that you bring some fall protection, and we can talk about that. The numbers on the slide there, if you're interested in registering somebody, we do limit the class to 6 people, and we do use a scissors lift as a training aid for that.
David, we do have 2 questions. First one is, if supervisors are trained and qualified in operating MEWP, would they require additional training?
No, we're good on that.
Okay. And the second question is, do we need to teach supervisors, operators, and occupants of the manual override of the electrical system?
I would say yes. Any emergency, any override that they can, as long as it's allowed by the manufacturer.
There was an additional question. Is the class that you had mentioned applies to COSS certification? Good
question. We could probably ask those folks before you attend. Have connection with them down there. It's a safety class, so I would say they probably would allow it. Put my email on the screen there. More than welcome to give me a shout out and ask some more questions or any training. Another FYI is we can bring that training to you. You can either, you can come here to Kirkwood on campus, take the training, bring your company here, get them away from the shop. We can add to that cost. We can rent another lift that you would normally use, or we have kind of a contract, or not a contract, we have a gentleman's agreement with Sunbelt down the road here. Doesn't mean we have to use them, but they'll give us bring it right over. We're only a couple blocks from it. They can bring it over that day and lift on that. If we do come to your site, again, we'll want to have some prep time to make sure that we're familiar with what you guys are training on. If you ever talk to me about site training versus in-house training, it really depends on you. I like to have you here at Kirkwood because it gets you away from any distractions. However, I do understand that if you want to train on a specific piece of equipment, we'll come to your site. We'll do that. So it's available too.
And we had a few additional questions, Dave.
Okay, thank you.
For walking or creeping purposes, if a scissor lift has a pendant line on the control box, can you not operate it outside the lift?
Okay. I would hesitate on doing that, but I got one of my instructors here, and we kind of agree that you probably could, but very limited.
Okay. Do you foresee OSHA making these ANSI standards a part of their program?
No, OSHA seems to use these as a good housekeeping thing to do, and then of course they cite you underneath the duty clause. So I would say no. I looked at the most current 1910-178, and it doesn't even refer to the this particular standard yet.
Okay. One last question. Are we required to have a 4-foot tether on aerial lifts?
Yeah, we're thinking 4 is okay. You could actually get out to a 6 foot also. And that allows us for our fall, determining our fall distance. 6 foot, that's usually what OSHA goes with. But 4, yeah. Again, the closer the better. Limit that fall, right? I thank you guys very much for attending. I was excited about this presentation. Been working on it for a while. I definitely got some passion about this. So again, if you got any questions, anything else, please send me an email. And if you're interested in signing up, give us a shout and we'll get you registered. Thank you very much.